Hello, friend. This is Legal Design Thinking in Real Life, a live series provided by Lawyers Design School. And I'm your host, Hannele Korhonen, and I'm the founder of Lawyers Design School. And today I'm here with a very special guest, Sarah Ouis, and we'll cover a super interesting topic that's very close to my heart as well. We'll talk about visualization of legal information and how it can be effectively used to increase understanding and usability of legal content. Hello, Sarah, and welcome.
Hi, Hannele. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
So great to have you. Yeah. Where are you joining us?
So it's a bit complicated. I'm back in my home country, France. So for a few weeks, and it's really hot in here. I don't know about you guys, but yeah, I'm literally burning at the moment.
It's not hot in here. It's not hot in Helsinki.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's maybe very different.
But hey, so great to have you today. And anyone who is watching this live, you can join the discussion with your questions and comments. So keep them coming. But let's dive right in with Sarah. Could you give a brief introduction and share a bit about your story that led you where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a bit of a long story. I will try to make it short. So my name is Sarah Ouis, and I have qualified in France as a lawyer back in 2014. And I pretty much developed my career in the UK. So I started my work really working as an in-house counsel back in the UK in 2016, even though I qualified in France. So European lawyer, I arrived in a new jurisdiction, I kind of have to adapt. I knew I didn't want to be in a law firm, so I've started my career in-house, and I've worked in-house for 7 years. I have become head of legal, and fast forward, more recently, I kind of developed a passion for making things better in-house, and this translated into the topic of today, which is visualizing legal content, because I used to do that as an in-house counsel. I was frustrated with the way we were communicating or not communicating, and then I started to put that content on LinkedIn, and then people started to reach out, ask for advice, and so on and so forth. So fast forward, I realized I wasn't necessarily passionate about being an in-house counsel, but rather problem solved by design. And I ended up in legal technology for Contract.ai, and I'm running my own business as well. And more recently, I'm doing my whole business full time, and it does revolve around visualizing legal content in different contexts. One being social media in order to develop your visibility, get leads, and so on in a way that stands out for a legal professional. And the other service that I do have is I do work with legal teams as well, and that really teaches them the fundamentals of visualizing legal information and the benefits of it. So that's in a nutshell.
Oh, thank you. It's so fascinating to always hear about the different paths that people have before taking on this new way of approaching law. But this series is all about legal design in action, and I know that the audience is always so eager to see practical examples. And I know that you are prepared to share one example with us. Could you walk us through the example?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as part of the project I get involved in as a visual design consultant, I do get involved in some legal design projects, and I do also get involved in more what you call visual communication. So how can you position yourself as an in-house legal department? How do you communicate better and more efficiently? And what visual communication does is also that it positions the legal department very different. So you kind of try to move away from being a cost center to a value creator. And you do that by communicating your value. And rather than doing that in an email or something that is very boring and that no one is going to care anyway, you try to find more innovative and eye-grabbing, attention-grabbing ways to communicate that. So that's really in that spirit that I wanted to share that with you today. So I am going to share, there you go. So you should see, there you go. So you should
Yes.
see the prototype of a visual, what I call a visual newsletter. So this is a pilot that I've run for a corporate legal team in the energy industry, and what they wanted to achieve really is really positioning. It's part of a bigger legal ops and transformation strategy of positioning themselves as a innovative, world-class legal function, and it's part of obviously a major corporate in the energy sector. But the idea was to obviously communicate on the things that they were up to, and because it's a big conglomerate, it's really hard to get people's attention and get everyone at the same time. So we really worked on a pilot to kind of introduce them, explain the way the organization of the legal team is, the presentation also of the team members as well, and give it a more human, more of a human touch. And then here you would have more what's going on in the legal team. So some a dummy example of data, if we were to represent some data, some percentages, some clickable links as well embedded to showcase a training, for example. At the time, they were also rolling out one NDA internally. So the idea was, again, to come up with a communication message around the launch of one NDA. As for those of you who don't know one NDA, it's a standardized NDA that has been adopted by thousands of companies worldwide. And the idea is to facilitate the transaction and build efficiencies. And that's also what we are trying to communicate on in this particular page. So that's a pilot that we've rolled out. That was last year as part of a communication project.
Oh, that's super interesting. What was the original challenge that you wanted to tackle with this prototype?
So,
what was the question, and what were the problems?
So the problem really revolved around, okay, how can we, as a legal function, not just become innovative in the way we do things, but also improve the perception, and not just be innovative, but look innovative as well. So that was because a lot of things were happening in the background. So they've revamped a lot of things that they are doing. But the problem is, unless you interact with business units on a very regular basis, and unless you tell them what's going on, unless you really advocate for what you are doing to make processes and more cost-effective and more efficient, and unless you have some data, it's really hard to look innovative as well. So the major challenge was here the perception, moving away from the cost center and the way legal departments typically look and operate, and really try to position the legal team as forward-thinking, innovative, and also creative in the way they communicate. And that goes through not just communicating, but communicating in a way that is much more crisp, effective, and position the team accordingly.
So fascinating, especially the fact that the problem was about the perception and not really about, of course it reflects on the doing part as well, but it's so true that many times there's so much going on inside the legal team, and then the other units in the organization don't even know what's going on. So it's really a communication problem and perception problem.
Absolutely. Yeah. It is all about, it was really internal reputation and branding, internal branding. Absolutely.
And lawyers are typically not very good at branding and thinking about these things. Did it get, or did you have to do a lot of convincing that this branding is actually actually important, or was it already there, the desire to improve the brand?
So the people I work with in-house really tend to be innovative general counsels, associate general counsels, and head of legal operations. So my clients typically come to me already with a clear understanding of what they want to achieve. So clearly, we want to improve our internal reputation. We want to improve the way we look, the way we are perceived, and we want to position ourselves as innovative and forward thinking. They don't necessarily know how to achieve that. So it didn't need convincing at the leadership level. Now, of course, as part of any team, you will have what I call the champions, the core team that is really here to drive the project forward, the enthusiasts in the team that will take it forward and take ownership and ride with it, and those that don't necessarily see the point or the value, which is okay, because when you start anything, you need a core team to move forward, but you have to also appreciate that you won't get everyone on board, and that's okay. So I've really worked with the associate general counsel and the head of legal operations, so they were the one really championing the project in-house, and then they've explained the challenge, and then we've come up with a pilot, and then we just ran with it.
So you already mentioned this. Who were involved in the project? What was the project team?
So the project team, it was the associate general counsel and the head of legal operations, in terms of like I would say the client-facing team. And then in the back end, they would then interact with everyone else in the legal team to kind of think about the things that they could communicate on, anything interesting that they were working on that would be worth communicating with the wider business. So obviously, the back end of the legal team was also involved, but more in terms of information gathering, providing the information, and things like that.
What can you tell us about the project itself? What happened, and what were the steps that you took?
Yeah, so two types of things happen. If that's okay, I'll walk through my thought process first, and then I can dive into the results. So my thought process was obviously it was really what you would pretty much call a brand identity exercise. So I had to look at the identity of the legal team, the personas, so to the people that were making up the legal team, the personality, and the way they wanted to position themselves ultimately. So as you can see here, for example, it's a very illustrated newsletter. So it could have looked much more corporate, if you will. And it could have looked black and white and, a very corporate look, like almost a PowerPoint presentation. But it isn't really the way the legal team the way the legal team was and the way they wanted to position themselves. They really wanted something more illustrated, something that stands out, that doesn't look like a PowerPoint presentation. So I first went through figuring out what the identity was going to be. And I came up with some keyword, like visual keywords. So typically, I went for something that was much more illustrated, something that was much more playful, and something that you wouldn't necessarily expect for a legal function. So once I had the idea, then I went to do what we call a mood boarding. So the mood boarding is an exercise where you fish around for inspiration. And this is really what I used here in order to get inspired. So I went out there and I just went and looked for what was happening in the energy sector, because that's their industry, and what type of inspiration I could get from that type of industry, how they would convey their illustrations and things like that. And this is also how I came up with the color scheme. So the dark green and the gold yellow and the fonts being used. And so all of those visual identity components were, I gathered it from the mood board exercise, and I could see what was going on. So that was more on the fishing around for inspiration for the visual aspect of the newsletter. And then in terms of the information itself, so what happened is, so the legal team told me, okay, well, just, this is the type of information we want to communicate about. So we want to communicate data. We want to introduce our teams. We want to introduce where we sit in the org chart. And I just came up with pretty much dummy text just to illustrate what it could look like. So they've given me the direction, and then I came up with a copy. So I'm the one that organized the information architecture. So what would come first, what would come second and next, what would be the headlines, what would be the body copy. So I really engineered the whole information architecture, the tone of voice and things like that. And then yeah, so that has been really my process. So define the identity of the legal team in-house, mood board for inspiration and the look and feel of the newsletter, engineering the information in such a way that flows in a logical order and in a way that is reflective of them. And then in terms of the results, so we've been running the newsletter for over a year now, and it's been super interesting to see the impact. So in terms of data, the newsletter is basically being consumed by one-fourth, like one employee out of four. So 1/4 of the company reads the newsletter. Bearing in mind it's thousands of people in the organization, so that's a lot of people consuming it in-house, and also they got recognized internally for the newsletter, so they got some awards for it, either on the initiative itself, but also on the messaging, because there was an edition we were talking about diversity and inclusion, so they've got awards for that. They got recognized externally as well, so they had some of the leadership team had awards for the way they were running the legal function. So it wasn't just the newsletter, but that was part of it. So that's for more the PR, the exposure internally. Then the legal team itself, so the other members in the other offices that were not necessarily involved at its creation, used it as part of their recruitment policies. So what they've done is that they took the newsletter to hire people. So they said, hey, this is our culture, this is the way we operate, this is the way we communicate internally. And as part of joining the team, that's the type of people we are looking for. We are looking for people that are innovative, that can convey this type of message and things like that. So that's in a nutshell, after a year worth of data.
Oh, that's wonderful, and I can imagine that you are happy with the results, that the impact goes beyond just a newsletter, that it can actually be used in the recruiting and communicating that this is what we are as a team, and these are the values, and this is the culture. There's a question in the comments about the personas. Did you make personas representing the audience of this newsletter? Well, how many personas and what profiles?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was part of the whole identity. So I've made 3 personas, one senior level, so more executive type, one mid-level management, and then one more day-to-day executive tasks. Absolutely. So it was part of the reflection when I was creating the content and when I was kind of doing the information architecture exercise. So it's not really something that you are going to see specifically in a particular page, because the content really depends on what's happening in the legal team at any given time. But absolutely, I take that into account when I craft the messaging. Depending on the topic, obviously, it will be more relevant. If it's a training, it's going to be more relevant for mid-level below rather than a C-suite. So I take that into account in the way I structure the information and the messaging I use.
Sure. What about the lessons learned? I'm curious to hear about the challenges that I'm sure that you encountered along the way.
So something that was very interesting is the iterative process. So it's not your typical design project where you have a really painful problem. I mean, the perception is obviously it is a problem, but it's really an industry problem rather than a legal team problem. Like this particular legal team problem. So, and that's because legal teams, lawyers, we don't know how to communicate. This is just not something that we've learned. So you would assume that, compared to a full-on design exercise where you touch on processes and things like that, it would be easier. But it is a different challenge. So you have to go through an iterative process as well, because like I'm showing you the pilot, but obviously between that version and what has been created more recently, we really have seen a difference in terms of the depth of the content, and it's trial and error, and it is iteration. And for example, we've noticed patterns. So we've noticed that depending on the topic, some editions performed better because of the topic that were covered. So that gives an indication of what the audience wants more of from the legal team from a communication standpoint. So that taught me a lot about how legal teams can communicate efficiently. And it's not necessarily, here is the latest training. That's a very technical thing. And the business units don't necessarily care very much about that, to be honest. Whereas when you cover, hey, this is our diversity and inclusion policy. We have X, female and X moms and X amount of dads that went on paternity. Like these are the things that went through the roof in terms of engagement because it was much more human. So that gave us an indication. Okay, we need to incorporate more of that moving forward.
Oh, perfect example. It's not like, what's the latest training? busy business people could not care less about the latest training unless it's really relevant for them in their everyday
100%
in everyday work. There's an interesting question in the chat. Sonia is asking because she said that they have been experimenting with internal newsletters in the video format. And do you have any tips on the use of alternative media on top of charts and so forth?
So I'm really focused more on the visualization. So I haven't experimented videos. However, what I would say is, and that's more my experience on social media, is that people tend to have a very short attention span. So I don't know how long the video was, but if it's going to be like a 10-minute long video, chances are that it might be too long for something that doesn't necessarily, that is more of a nice to have in people's mind. So the newsletter, for example, I mean, we limited to a number of pages because we knew, okay, if it's going to become a 30 pages long newsletter, it's going to be very difficult for people to stick around. So we kept it to a maximum of 8 pages, and we keep it to 1 pages per legal unit. So it's divided in multiple units. So for you, Sonia, I would say maybe if you are doing a video and maybe have a look, experiment different formats, experiment shorter form videos, maybe subtitles as well. So when you do videos, people don't necessarily put the sound on. They might just watch what they are doing something else. So maybe put subtitles as well, and experiment with topics. I really can't emphasize enough the importance of experimenting different topics, because sometimes it's not the medium, it's just the information that sits in there that might not be catchy.
Yeah, and you have to try different angles. That for some the other title is very, very important, and for others they are looking for something else. Great advice.
Absolutely.
Hey, if we think about the visualization of legal information in a broader sense, what could be the broader benefits of using visualizations in in-house teams?
So for in-house teams, I mean, there's so many there are so many possible use cases, but if I was to kind of drill this down into a few, I would say following processes. So processes, a lot of people just assume that people don't follow processes because they're lazy. And therefore, you have to kind of police people around, and you have to send a reminder email for people to comply. But the reality is, most of them, if the process was user-friendly enough or clear enough, they wouldn't come to you and ask what to do, or they wouldn't try to cut corners. So the only reason they do that is because it's quicker to come to you than follow the actual rules. So there might be an element of misunderstanding, or the process just sucks. So you have to figure out which one it is. And depending on that, obviously visualization, if it's an issue with understanding what to do, then visualizing the process in a different way can be a very good way to test people's understanding. Sometimes if the process sucks, you have to look at the process. Like you have to just redesign it from scratch, see where the frictions are, and really try to look at the root causes. But visualization could help with process compliance. Number two, I would say, obviously, information design. So the way contracts, policies are usually written is awful. It's usually heavily legalistic, long-winded. And it's not just I guess using visualization can help with that, but if you visualize legalese and technical content and content that is unreasonable, it is not going to do you a favor. It could be almost the opposite. So first you have to structure the information in a way that is user-friendly. Then you have to use plain language. So you have to make sure that the content you have in there is easy to understand, readable, and so on. You have to make sure that the terms are fair as well. If it's a contract, if it's a one-sided contract, you are going to have problems. And then on top of that, yes, you can add an element of visualization. If you use visual design principles, it is going to assist with accessibility and readability as well. But again, you have to fix the content first before you do anything else. And you have to really test your documents with the people who interact with the contract. So visualization can help with better consumption of information as well. And the number three, that's the example I've given you today. It's really the reputation, internal reputation, external reputation as well. Because at the end of the day, let's say you are Nike and you are a slick brand and everything looks great. You have an amazing website. And then you onboard your suppliers and you slap them in the face with a 200 pages long purchasing agreement that is awful to read. Again, this won't do much. So your internal reputation matters, and so does your external reputation. So the way you are perceived also goes through your contract and anything that you make people sign. So again, having something much more visual, much more crisp, can really assist with the general perception and reputation of the legal department.
Oh, perfect. And I really love that you cannot really, you have to fix the process, or you have to fix the content first. You cannot just add visualization on top of it and just hope for the best that everybody complies and understands. It's not the way it goes.
Absolutely. Yeah, it tends to be the shortcut, unfortunately, because it's the most fun part. It's true. But at the end of the day, it's always, you have to research, you have to speak to people, and then you have to fix the content and the processes around them, and then, test and iterate whatever pilot you come up with and measure success. So it's all of those things.
For sure. Hey, Elvina is asking, what platform and tools do you think are the best helpers to create legal design documents? Canva or Figma are mentioned, but I have another suggestion, but you go first, Sarah.
It really depends on how savvy you are with tools. Because again, you could pretty much do, like the tool almost becomes secondary. You have to first decide, okay, like it depends on what you're working on and the design constraints you have. Because if it's a contract that is going to be heavily redlined, you won't be able to use Canva or Figma. It will have to be Microsoft Word, because that's where the users on the other party would be, right? So you have to take that into account, and therefore, to redesign a contract that is heavily redlined, it will have to be a Microsoft Word. If it's a static document, then you become more flexible. You could use the Adobe Creative Suite. You could use Canva. I haven't really used Figma beyond when I was taking classes on user interface. So I haven't used Figma for anything else, so I can't comment on Figma. But Canva or the Adobe Suite would be more suited for more static documents that don't require redlining, review, and things like that. So if you want to create something very visual, but that's going to stay the way it is, and with just a couple of hyperlinks in there, clickable things, then that's fine. You could use potentially those. But always think about, okay, what's the project? What are the constraints around it? And that will dictate what possible tools that you can use.
Yes, agree with that. And I always tell people to use what they already have, because they like, for example, MS Word, it's so underused, all the features and all the visualizations you can do even with just the plain old Word. So, but of course, it's good that people are also ready to experiment with new tools as well. So.
Yeah, but you're absolutely right. Like Microsoft Word, I mean, it's not the most usable product depending on what you want to do, but you could absolutely take a contract and do a really good job with it by just discovering, really playing around with the tool and what it can do, playing with tables and things like that, and then visual design principles applied on top.
Absolutely. Hey, for those who are interested in diving into visualizing legal information, what would you recommend as the easiest way to get started?
The easiest way, I really like the courses from the, oh my goodness, I think it's the heat here. I lost the name of it. Interaction Design Foundation. That's the one. Interaction Design Foundation. They have a lot of free classes. For a starter, this is a perfect place to start. It's not necessarily legal specific, so that would be the downside. It's really more classes about visual design and user experience and things like that. But it's a really good starting point. I just went for the paid route directly, but that's because I really wanted to take it to the next level. But if you want to start, you can just start there. Then go on YouTube. You can just watch tutorials of the way people redesign their PowerPoint, Microsoft Word as well. Like you have tutorials on how you can use PowerPoint, Word more efficiently. This is what you use regularly. And then if you are interested in other tools, again, I would just say go on YouTube, just Google it, how to do this on Canva, how to do this on this platform. And that could be an easy starting point for you to get going.
Let's get back to your journey to legal design. I always love to hear more about the personal stories. What has your own experience been like? You told us about the story of starting as an in-house counsel, but what was the kind of the experience and kind of diving into innovation and legal design? Because I know that it's not always so easy and straightforward.
So for me, it definitely has been an organic journey. It's been very organic. So I didn't wake up one day saying, hey, this is what I want to do moving forward. It was a realization from a very early stage of my career when I was qualifying as a lawyer, actually, when I was in-house as an apprentice. I just could see the legal team's perception. I could see that there was an issue there. And I think that's also maybe why I'm so almost obsessed with the way legal teams are perceived, because I've suffered from that. And I was like, why are we just being looked down upon? And why do we have a poor reputation of being boring and dull? Like, that's not me. I'm not boring, So that was like a realization. And then when I evolved in my career, I could see that the way we were doing things just didn't make sense. We were unnecessarily cautious, risk averse. We were not business friendly. We people. Not. I would hope that it wasn't my case, but I would really try to say to accommodate the business as much as possible. So that's how it started. It wasn't visualization. It was, how can I look different? How can I be perceived by the business better? How can I be a better business partner? This was the problem statements I had. And from there, I prototyped the solutions. So I tried to come up with more aggressive commercial terms that were more business friendly. I tried to cut down on processes that were redundant. I just got rid of the contract we didn't need to review. And so it was, as I worked on processes, I worked on communication, I incorporated visuals in training. So it was really all of those things combined that got me going. So I just prototyped my own solutions based on my own frustrations. And all I did, I then put down social media and I said, hey, this is what I do, because we just can't operate the way we do as in-house counsels.
That's so powerful when you start kind of solving your own frustrations. And I really love the way you phrased it. Like, you thought that, like, you felt like, I'm not boring and dull. Why should my work be boring and dull? So that's kind of also a personality thing. And I think that many people interested in legal design can really relate to that they don't see themselves as in this like very serious and boring and complex legal space that we have traditionally seen.
Yeah, it definitely was. It was really a call from the heart. You're not like that. This is not the way you are going to practice. And I couldn't resonate with the way I could see other people practicing and redlining for the sake of redlining and saying no, it's not business standard without offering an alternative solution that would work both ways. So it was much bigger than visuals, but visuals was obviously part of the things I've done.
Yeah. There's still one question. What books do you recommend?
So what books do I recommend for visuals? I'm assuming. I don't think I've read any books on visualization, because what I did, I took a 9-month graphic design school. So I just went straight away for schools. So I don't really have a book to recommend on top of my head, if I'm honest, when it comes to visualization, purely because all my teaching was on the graphic design school I've taken and YouTube. So I've just typed graphic design lessons and things like that.
There's one more about AI. Are you afraid that AI will do legal design free of charge for law firms? Can AI do legal design?
So it can do an element of it. AI is a fantastic tool when it comes to supporting legal design projects, to the point of taking an entire project from scratch and doing it all the way to completion. I genuinely doubt that it will one day be able to do that, because there's an element of human interaction, but it's going to help you put together user research. You can feed the AI the results of your research and say, pull a summary and extract, a list of 10 problems that result from that research if you have a lot of data. So I would definitely say that AI is going to help in legal design projects. I'm definitely not afraid that law firms will be able to do it themselves for free by using AI, because AI is a tool, and unless you know the methodology behind it and how to conduct the project, AI won't help you much. It can facilitate and piecemeal some of the things, but it's never going to be able to do everything from scratch without human interactions.
Agree. It's a great tool, great assistant. But hey, before we wrap up, what are you currently working on, and where can people find more about you and your work?
So more recently, and it's a bit heartbreaking, I would say, but I've really, unfortunately, when it comes to visualization, it's when I speak to legal teams, I've worked with very innovative in-house legal teams, right? So they see the value, they know that if they want to improve the way they do things, but also improve their reputation, they have to invest in certain things where the return on investment isn't going to be dollar for dollar. I give you $1, I'm going to get 3 back. It's going to be a lot less quantitative and much more qualitative, getting awards, getting recognized, reaching a fourth of the workforce with your newsletter, things like that. That's the top 1% of legal teams. So what I found is really that in-house legal teams, unfortunately, really perceive that as a nice to have, and it makes it a hard sell. And on the other hand, I have my social media offering where it's really visualization, it's visual content applied for social media to stand out on social media, get clients and things like that. That is not a nice to have, but a must, and I can see that there's much more success on that. So this is really what I'm focusing on. At the moment, that's my full focus. And then I do take those in-house projects every now and then when the request comes in. But unfortunately, because of the perception and because it's not a priority for in-house teams, it isn't really something that I focus on as much anymore. So at the moment, I'm much more on the social media side, and I help people get clients, small clients, using LinkedIn, using visuals and things like that. So it's, I guess, for a different, it's communication, but more for social media.
And I can definitely recommend following Sarah's accounts, because then you can see how to do social media.
Absolutely. Yes. It is a gold mine for the legal industry. And the idea is to not just help lawyers and legal professionals communicate visually, but more importantly, really be in a position where they can learn how to market themselves and stay relevant, especially with AI.
Oh, yes. Exactly. Hey, so is LinkedIn your primary channel, or where should people go and find you?
LinkedIn, absolutely. Yes, this is the primary one I'm using.
Okay.
And then Instagram,
perfect.
if you guys are on Instagram, my handle is Designing Legal.
Perfect. Hey, thank you, Sarah, so much for coming today and taking the time to talk about visualizations of legal information.
You're welcome. Thank you so much, guys, for making the time today. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Hanel. Thank you for the amazing questions. You've been an amazing host as well.
Thank you. And thank you for the audience. You've been so active in the chat and comments. It's been really lovely.
Yeah.
Yes.
They definitely
but bye
were
for
there
now,
and very
and
active.
see you
Thank
next.
you so much.
Yes. Yeah. Bye for now, and see you next week.
See you next Sunday.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.